I never thought I'd be grateful for the day my husband left me for my best friend, but life has a way of surprising you. The memory is still crystal clear. Anton's cologne lingering in our bedroom as he packed his bags, while I stood in the doorway, clutching a crumpled receipt I'd found in his jacket pocket, a reservation for 2 at La Maison, our special place. Except this time, it wasn't meant for me. My name is Jacqueline, and this is how I learned to turn betrayal into triumph. Jackie, we need to talk, Anton had said that morning, his voice unusually stern. I should have known something was wrong when he made coffee. He never made coffee. About the receipt, I asked, watching his face pale. Or about the fact that you've been sleeping with Yara? The mug in his hand trembled slightly. How did you find out? Well, when your husband suddenly starts working late every Tuesday and Thursday, and your best friend cancels your weekly lunch dates on the same days, it doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. He set the mug down, coffee sloshing over the rim. I didn't mean for this to happen, I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. Really? You didn't mean to sleep with my best friend? What, did you trip and fall into her bed? Jackie, please. Don't Jackie me. How long? 6 months, he whispered. The truth hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of fake smiles, of Yara hugging me and asking about my marriage while sleeping with my husband behind my back. I'm moving out, Anton said, already heading for the stairs. Yara and we want to be together properly. I followed him upstairs, watching as he methodically packed away 12 years of our marriage into 2 suitcases. Does this make you feel better? I asked. Doing it properly? He paused, holding one of his expensive suits. We never meant to hurt you. That's funny because it hurts like hell. My phone buzzed. A message from Yara. I'm so sorry. I hope someday you can forgive us both. I threw the phone across the room, watching it crack against the wall. The sound made Anton jump. I'll send someone for the rest of my things, he said, zipping up his bags. The divorce papers will come through my lawyer. As he headed for the door, I called out, Wait. He turned, hope flickering across his face. That watch I gave you for our 10th anniversary, the one you're wearing, take it off. Jackie, take it off. He removed it slowly, placing it on the hallway table. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand. You know what the inscription says? Time has only made us stronger. Funny how time actually showed me what a fool I've been. After he left, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the half-drunk coffee he'd abandoned. The house felt enormous and empty, echoing with memories I suddenly couldn't trust. Photos on the walls mocked me. Happy couples, friendly gatherings, Yara as my maid of honor at our wedding. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Ruby, my college friend who'd recently moved back to town. I came as soon as I saw your text, she said, wrapping me in a tight hug. What do you need? Ice cream? Wine? An alibi? For the first time that day, I laughed genuinely. All of the above? We sat on my kitchen floor, sharing a bottle of Merlot and a pint of chocolate ice cream. You know what the worst part is? I said, licking my spoon. I built my whole life around them. My best friend and my husband. I don't even know who I am without them. Ruby topped up my wine glass. Then maybe it's time to find out. What do you mean? Remember that idea you had in college? The natural skincare line? You were so passionate about it before Anton convinced you to take that corporate job instead. I blinked, memories flooding back. That was just a dream. Maybe it's time to make it reality, Ruby said, her eyes sparkling. You've got your savings, your business degree, and now you've got nothing holding you back. I stood up suddenly, wobbling slightly from the wine. Walking to my home office, I pulled out an old notebook from the bottom drawer. Inside were formulas, sketches, and plans I'd made years ago. You know what? I said, flipping through the pages, feeling a spark of excitement for the first time in hours. Maybe you're right. Maybe this isn't the end of my story. Ruby raised her glass. To new beginnings? I raised mine in return, a plan already forming in my mind. To rising from the ashes. 3 months after Anton walked out, I stood in my converted garage, surrounded by dozens of small glass bottles and the sweet scent of essential oils. Ruby perched on a stool nearby, typing furiously on her laptop. Phoenix Rise Beauty, because every woman deserves a second chance at radiance, she read aloud. How's that for the tagline? I smiled, carefully measuring drops of rosehip oil into my latest batch. It's perfect, though I'm still not sure about using my personal story as a marketing angle. Trust me, Ruby said, spinning her laptop around. Your story is what makes this authentic. Look at these responses to our test campaign. The screen showed comments from women across the country. Finally, someone who gets it. Love that this brand stands for something real. Where can I pre-order? The doorbell interrupted our discussion. Through the garage window, I spotted a courier with an official-looking envelope. I'll get it, Ruby offered, but I shook my head. No, I need to face whatever this is. The envelope contained divorce papers, but tucked inside was a handwritten note from Anton. I miss you. Can we talk? My hand shook as I walked back to the garage. Ruby took one look at my face and knew. The papers came? I nodded, dropping them on the workbench, along with a note saying he misses me. That manipulative piece of... It doesn't matter, I cut her off, returning to my oils. I've got more important things to focus on, like this formula that still isn't quite right. Ruby grabbed my hands, forcing me to stop. Jackie, you're allowed to be angry. I'm not angry, I said, pulling away. I'm busy, there's a difference. Really? Because you've been measuring that same oil 4 times now. I looked down at the overflowing bottle and swore. Fine, I'm angry. I'm furious. Happy now? Actually, yes, Ruby grinned. Anger can be productive. Channel it into the business. She was right. Over the next few hours, we refined the formula until it was perfect. A healing blend that made my skin glow despite the stress and sleepless nights. We need to get this in front of people, Ruby declared. I know someone who runs a local wellness market. Let's set up a booth next weekend. The market was bustling when we arrived early Saturday morning. Our booth looked professional but personal. Photos of my transformation journey subtly displayed alongside our products. Remember, Ruby coached, when people ask about the brand, be honest. Your vulnerability is your strength. The first few customers trickled in slowly, but word spread quickly about the Miracle Glow Serum. By noon, we had a steady stream of interested buyers. This scent is amazing, one woman said, testing the serum. What's your story? I took a deep breath. 3 months ago, my husband left me for my best friend. Instead of letting it destroy me, I decided to create something beautiful from the pain. Her eyes widened. My God, the same thing happened to my sister. She's still devastated. Give her this, I said, handing her a sample. Tell her it gets better. By day's end, we'd sold out of everything and collected a list of pre-orders. As we packed up, Ruby's phone buzzed. Jackie, she said slowly, you need to see this. It was an Instagram post from Yara, a photo of her and Anton in front of a sold sign, captioned, New house, new beginnings. Rue blessed. I stared at their smiling faces, my stomach churning. They looked happy, settled, while I was starting over from scratch. Don't let them get to you, Ruby warned. Look what you've accomplished today. I gestured at our empty booth. This? It's nothing compared to their new house. No, it's better. It's yours. You built this from nothing but determination and talent. As if on cue, my phone dinged with an email notification. Ruby, I whispered, look at this. A major beauty retailer wanted to schedule a meeting about carrying Phoenix Rise in their stores. Still think this is nothing? Ruby asked, grinning. I read the email again, feeling something shift inside me. You know what? You're right. Let them have their house. I'm building an empire. Back home, I finally opened the divorce papers. Instead of feeling devastated, I felt lighter. I signed each page with steady hands, then sealed the envelope. To new beginnings? Ruby asked, pulling out a bottle of champagne. To Phoenix Rise, I corrected, smiling as I heard my phone buzz with another order notification. And to Karma, because she's just getting started. Little did I know how true those words would prove to be. 5 years can change everything. I stood in my office at Phoenix Rise headquarters, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold. The view still took my breath away, even after 2 years in this building. Jackie, Ruby burst through the door, tablet in hand. Have you seen the numbers from last quarter? I was just about to. We've doubled our projections. She thrust the tablet at me. The new healing cream line is outselling everything else in its category. I scrolled through the report, a smile spreading across my face. Send these to Nathan. He'll want to see them before tomorrow's board meeting. Already done. Ruby flopped onto my office couch. Speaking of Nathan, he asked about that mysterious investor again. The one who keeps trying to schedule meetings. Tell him what I always say. We're not interested in outside investment. But Jackie, they're offering... A knock at the door interrupted us. My assistant Maria poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. I don't have any appointments. It's Yara. The name hit me like a physical blow. Ruby jumped to her feet. Want me to tell her to get lost? No, I said, smoothing my skirt. Send her in. Yara looked different, gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Instead, she wore jeans and a plain sweater, her face drawn and tired. Jackie, she said softly, you look amazing. What do you want, Yara? She twisted her hands together. I know I have no right to be here, but we need your help. Anton and I, we're in trouble. Ruby snorted. That's rich. What kind of trouble? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Financial trouble. The housing market crashed, and Anton's real estate business. She swallowed hard. We're about to lose everything. And you thought of me because you're successful, because despite what we did to you, you've thrived. Tears welled in her eyes, because I remember how kind you used to be. Used to be, I repeated, before my husband and best friend betrayed me. I know we hurt you. Hurt me? I laughed. You destroyed my life. Or at least you tried to. Please, she whispered. Just talk to Anton. He's outside. Of course he was. I walked to my office door and opened it. Sure enough, there he stood, looking older and considerably less polished than the man who'd walked out 5 years ago. Hello, Jackie, he said. It's Jacqueline, I corrected. Only friends call me Jackie. He flinched. Right, Jacqueline. You've done well for yourself. I have, no thanks to you. Ruby cleared her throat. Should I call security? I considered it for a moment, then had a better idea. No, let's hear them out. We moved to the conference room where Anton laid out their situation. Bad investments, mounting debt, and a market crash had wiped them out. They were 3 months away from bankruptcy. We're not asking for a handout, Anton said, but maybe a partnership. Your brand is growing and I still have contacts. The contacts that are currently avoiding your calls, I interrupted. He had the grace to look embarrassed. We can still bring value to your company. I stood up, walking to the window. Below, the Phoenix Rise logo glowed against the darkening sky. 5 years of hard work, of rebuilding myself from nothing, of proving them wrong. I'll think about it, I said finally. Really? Yara's face lit up. I'll have my team review your situation and get back to you in a week. After they left, Ruby exploded. You can't seriously be considering helping them. I smiled, a plan already forming in my mind. Remember what you told me 5 years ago, about anger being productive? Yeah. Well, I'm about to be very productive. I picked up my phone. Get me Nathan. We need to talk about that mysterious investor. Later that night, I sat in my home office, reviewing old photos on my laptop. There was one from my wedding day, Yara adjusting my veil, Anton waiting at the altar. I'd kept it all these years, a reminder of what I'd lost. Now, looking at it, I saw something different, a reminder of what I'd gained: strength, independence, power. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Did some digging on Anton's business. You're going to want to see this. I smiled, closing the laptop. Time has only made us stronger, I whispered, echoing the words from that long-ago watch inscription. But this time, I was the one who was stronger, and they were about to find out just how much. Nathan spread the documents across my desk, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Look at this, he said, pointing to a highlighted section. Anton's been moving money between shell companies for years. Is it illegal? I asked, scanning the papers. Not technically, but it's sketchy as hell. Nathan leaned back in his chair. He's been using these companies to hide assets. The question is, from whom? Ruby, who'd been unusually quiet, spoke up from her corner. From his investors, obviously, the ones he screwed over. Exactly, Nathan said. And here's where it gets interesting. One of those shell companies. It's still active, and it's sitting on a decent amount of money. I raised an eyebrow. How decent? 2 million, give or take, Ruby whistled. So much for being broke. Oh, they're broke, Nathan corrected. This money is tied up in legal knots. Anton can't touch it without exposing his whole scheme. I drummed my fingers on the desk. But someone else could. Nathan's eyes twinkled. With the right paperwork and the right pressure, absolutely. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Jacqueline? Mr. Anton and Ms. Yara are here for their appointment. Perfect timing, I smiled. Send them in. They looked even more desperate than last week. Anton's shirt was wrinkled, and Yara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Thank you for seeing us again, Anton said, taking a seat. I gestured to the papers on my desk. I've been reviewing your situation. And? Yara leaned forward eagerly. And I'm willing to help. I paused, watching their faces light up. On certain conditions. Anything, Anton said quickly. Too quickly. First, I want full transparency. Every account, every transaction, every business deal from the past 5 years. Anton's face paled slightly. That's a lot of paperwork. Is it? I asked innocently. I thought you kept good records. We do, it's just... Just what, Anton? Is there something you don't want me to see? Yara touched his arm. Anton, we have to tell her. Tell me what? Anton loosened his collar. Some of our business dealings were... complicated. You mean like the shell company holding $2 million? The color drained from his face. How did you... I have good lawyers, I said simply. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over control of all your business interests to Phoenix Rise. All of them, Yara squeaked. In exchange, you'll both receive consulting positions with the company, modest salaries, health insurance, the works. That's generous, Anton said carefully. I'm not finished. You'll also sign an agreement giving me full authority to handle any complicated situations that might arise. And if we refuse, I smiled, then I make a few phone calls to your investors. I'm sure they'd be very interested in knowing where their money really went. The room fell silent. Anton and Yara exchanged looks. We need time to think about it, Anton said finally. You have until tomorrow morning. The papers will be ready at 9. After they left, Ruby slow clapped. That was beautiful. But what's your real plan? I turned to Nathan. How long would it take to transfer that $2 million to a charitable trust? With the right paperwork, a few days. And the women's shelter downtown, the one that helped me when I was at my lowest, they're still looking for funding, right? Ruby's eyes widened. Oh my God, you're going to... Give Anton's hidden money to the shelter. Yes. I picked up the phone. But first, I need to make a call to our mysterious investor. I think it's time they met our new business partners. Later that evening, I visited the shelter. Rosalind, the manager, greeted me with a warm hug. Jacqueline, we missed you at last month's fundraiser. I know, I'm sorry, but I might have something to make up for it. I handed her a folder. How would you feel about a $2 million endowment? Her jaw dropped. Are you serious? Consider it karma's donation. I smiled. Sometimes, justice takes the scenic route. Walking back to my car, I received a text from Ruby. Anton's been making calls all afternoon. Sounds desperate. Good, I thought. Let him feel what desperation tastes like. Let him understand what it means to have your future in someone else's hands. Tomorrow at 9, they'd sign those papers, thinking they were saving themselves. They had no idea they were actually signing their karma check. And I was going to make sure it cleared. 9 o'clock sharp, and my office was a battlefield of tension. Anton and Yara sat across from me, while Nathan quietly arranged documents on the conference table. Before we sign, Anton said, his voice strained, I want to know who this mystery investor is. Right on cue, the door opened. A tall woman in an impeccable suit walked in, and I watched the blood drain from Anton's face. Hello, Anton, she said coolly. Remember me? Victoria, he whispered. You know each other? I asked innocently, though I knew exactly who she was. One of Anton's biggest investors from 3 years ago. You could say that, Victoria replied, taking a seat. Anton lost $2 million of my money in what he called a guaranteed investment opportunity. Yara's head snapped toward Anton. You never told me about this. It wasn't relevant, he muttered. Wasn't relevant. Victoria laughed. You disappeared with my money, changed your phone number, and moved offices without a forwarding address. I'd say that's pretty relevant. I cleared my throat. Victoria has agreed to become a major stakeholder in Phoenix Rise. She'll be overseeing all our new acquisitions. You planned this, Anton accused, his fingers gripping the armrests. Actually, you planned it, I corrected. Every shell company, every hidden account. You created this maze. I'm just walking you through it. Nathan slid the contracts forward. Shall we begin? The next hour was excruciating for Anton and Yara as they signed away control of everything they owned. With each signature, Victoria's smile grew wider. There's one more thing, I said as they reached the final page. The women's shelter downtown needs board members for their charitable trust. You've both been nominated. A shelter? Yara asked. The same one that helped me put my life back together after you two destroyed it. I met her eyes. Consider it community service. This is blackmail, Anton growled. No, this is karma. But if you'd prefer, we could discuss this with the SEC instead. More signatures, more silent fury. When it was done, Nathan gathered the papers while Victoria stood. I'll see you both at Monday's board meeting, she said. Don't be late. After they left, Ruby burst in. Tell me I didn't miss the whole thing. Just the paperwork, I said. The real show starts Monday. Jackie, Nathan's voice was serious. Are you sure about this? Revenge can be a double-edged sword. This isn't just revenge, I replied. This is justice. They hurt people, Nathan. Not just me. Victoria, other investors, everyone they stepped on to get ahead. And the shelter angle is legitimate. They need oversight, and Anton and Yara need humility. Besides, I smiled, wait until they find out about the mandatory volunteer hours. Later that afternoon, Yara showed up alone at my office. Can we talk? She asked. Just us? I gestured to the chair. She sat, looking smaller than ever. I know you hate us, she began. I don't hate you, I interrupted. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. I just want you to understand consequences. By destroying us? By making you rebuild, like I had to. I leaned forward. The shelter saved my life, Yara. When you and Anton left, I was broken. They helped me find purpose again. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You were too busy playing house with my husband. I softened my tone. But now you have a chance to help other women find their strength. Don't waste it. She wiped her eyes. Anton's been lying to me. About Victoria, about the money. I feel so stupid. Then learn from it. Monday morning, you start fresh. How you handle this determines your future. After she left, I called Rosalind at the shelter. The papers are signed, I told her. You'll have your funding by next week. And our new board members? They'll be there Monday. Trust me, they're motivated to make this work. You're either an angel or a genius, Rosalind laughed. Neither, I said, watching the sunset paint the sky phoenix red. Just someone who believes in poetic justice. My phone buzzed with the text from Ruby. Drinks tonight to celebrate? I typed back, rain check, meeting Nathan to go over Monday's presentation. Some might call it overkill, but I believed in being thorough. Monday would change everything, not just for Anton and Yara, but for every woman who would find shelter and support thanks to their hidden millions. Sometimes karma needs a little help, and sometimes the best revenge isn't serving it cold, it's serving it with a side of redemption. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected twist. Ruby burst into my office before the board meeting, her face flushed with urgency. We have a problem, she said, tossing a USB drive onto my desk. Our IT team intercepted some emails between Anton and his lawyer. I plugged in the drive, scanning the messages quickly. Son of a... They're planning to contest the contract, Ruby continued. Claiming coercion and emotional distress, his lawyer thinks they have a case. Nathan appeared in the doorway. That's not all. Victoria just called. Anton reached out to her yesterday, offering to settle their old debt privately. He's trying to outmaneuver us, I said, standing up. Where are they now? In the lobby, Ruby replied, looking way too smug for people who signed away their assets 3 days ago. I grabbed my phone, sending a quick text to Rosalind. Execute Plan B now. The boardroom was tense when I walked in. Anton and Yara sat together, both wearing satisfied smiles. Victoria sat opposite them, her face unreadable. Before we begin, Anton announced, I have something to say. Actually, I interrupted, I believe Rosalind has the floor first. I gestured to the door where Rosalind stood, carrying a thick folder. Who's she? Anton demanded. The director of New Beginnings Women's Shelter, I said, and as of Friday, the legal executor of your hidden assets. The color drained from Anton's face. What? Rosalind opened her folder. Mr. Anton, that shell company you created, the one holding $2 million, it's now legally transferred to our charitable trust. The paperwork was processed first thing Friday morning. That's impossible, Anton sputtered. You can't... Actually, we can, Nathan interjected. You signed over full authority to handle any complicated situations. Remember? Yara turned to Anton, her voice shaking. You said that money was gone. The transfer is ironclad, Rosalind continued. Our lawyers made sure of it. And since it's now charitable trust money, any attempt to contest it would trigger an automatic IRS audit. Anton jumped to his feet. This is theft. No, Victoria said coldly. This is justice. That money, it came from investors like me, people you deceived. Now it's going to help people you hurt. Yara, he pleaded, tell them this isn't fair. But Yara was staring at the shelter's financial reports Rosalind had distributed. 200 women helped last year, she whispered. 50 children. And with this funding, we can double those numbers, Rosalind smiled. Thanks to your contribution. Anton lunged for the papers, but security was faster. 2 guards appeared at the door. You planned this from the start, he accused, pointing at me. You manipulative... Careful, I warned. Everything in this room is being recorded. For the board's records, of course. Yara stood up slowly. I want to see it. See what? Anton asked. The shelter. The women were helping. She turned to Rosalind. Can I? Of course, Rosalind replied. We're having an open house this afternoon. You can meet some of our residents. She's not going anywhere. Anton grabbed Yara's arm. She yanked it away. Yes, I am. And you're going to let me, or I'll tell Victoria exactly where her investment money really went. The room fell silent. Anton's face contorted with rage, then defeat. Fine, he spat. Go play saint with your new friends, but don't come crying to me when... When what? I interrupted. When she realizes there's more to life than covering up your lies. when she discovers her own strength. Ruby cleared her throat. Should I call the police, or will security be enough to escort Mr. Anton out? He left without another word, the guards following close behind. Yara lingered after the others filed out. I should have seen it, she said quietly. All the lies, the manipulation. I was so blind. Love can do that, I replied, or what we think is love. The shelter. Do you really think I could help? I think you understand what it's like to lose yourself to someone else's desires. That understanding could help a lot of women. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you, not for the revenge part, but for showing me a way to make something good out of all this. After she left with Rosalind, Ruby perched on my desk. Well, that was anticlimactic. I expected more fireworks. Sometimes the quietest explosions cause the most damage, I said, watching Anton's retreating figure through the window. Besides, this isn't over. No? I smiled, picking up my phone. The press release about Phoenix Rise's new charitable initiative goes out in an hour. Wait until Anton sees his name in the headlines. Sometimes karma doesn't need a big show. Sometimes it just needs the truth to come to light. The press conference room buzzed with energy. Reporters filled every seat, cameras flashing as I took my place at the podium. Ruby stood to my right, Victoria to my left, with Rosalind and, surprisingly, Yara seated in the front row. Thank you all for coming, I began. Today, Phoenix Rise is proud to announce our largest charitable initiative to date, a $5 million endowment to New Beginnings Women's Shelter. The room erupted with questions. I held up my hand for silence. This initiative was made possible through a unique partnership. Would Anton Dawson please join me at the podium? The room fell silent. Every head turned toward the back, where Anton stood frozen, having just walked in. He'd clearly come to disrupt the proceedings, but now found himself in the spotlight. Anton, I prompted, would you like to tell everyone about your generous contribution? He strode forward, fury evident in every step. This is a setup, he hissed as he reached the podium. Is it? I turned to the reporters. $2 million of this endowment comes directly from Mr. Dawson's previously undisclosed assets. Assets that, until recently, were hidden from his investors and the IRS. The camera flashes intensified. Anton gripped the podium, knuckles white. That's a lie, he said into the microphone. Victoria stepped forward. Is it? I have the paper trail right here. She held up a folder. Would you like me to share it with these reporters? A journalist in the front row stood up. Mr. Dawson, is it true that you lost millions in investor funds through shell companies? Another reporter jumped in. Are there other hidden accounts we should know about? Anton's face turned red. No comment. This is all a manipulation by my ex-wife. Your ex-wife? Yara's voice cut through the chaos as she stood up. Is trying to help people. Unlike you, who only helps yourself. The room went dead quiet. Anton stared at her in disbelief. Yara, what are you doing? The right thing, finally. She turned to the reporters. I've spent the past week at New Beginnings, seeing firsthand what this money can do. Women and children who've lost everything, just like I lost myself with you, Anton. More cameras flashed. More questions flew. Anton backed away from the podium, but there was nowhere to hide. If you'll direct your attention to the screens, I continued smoothly, you'll see our comprehensive plan for the endowment funds. The presentation played, showing before and after photos of the shelter, stories of women who'd rebuilt their lives, and detailed financial projections. But the reporter's eyes kept darting between Anton's crumbling facade and Yara's quiet dignity. Ms. Jacqueline, a reporter called out, what inspired this initiative? Sometimes, I said, looking directly at Anton, the best way to heal from betrayal is to turn it into something beautiful. Every woman deserves a second chance at happiness, at success, at life. This isn't over, Anton muttered as he stormed toward the exit. Actually, it is, Victoria called after him. The SEC would love to hear from you, by the way. They're very interested in those shell companies. The door slammed behind him. In the ensuing chaos of questions and camera flashes, Yara made her way to the podium. "I'd like to announce something else," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm joining New Beginnings as their new outreach coordinator. My experience, my mistakes, they can help other women avoid the same traps." Ruby squeezed my arm. "Did you know about this?" I shook my head, watching as Yara handled questions with growing confidence. The broken woman from last week was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone real. After the press conference, Rosalind pulled me aside. "You've started something bigger than revenge here," she said. "This morning, we received 3 calls from other women wanting to share their stories, wanting to help." "Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways," I replied, watching as Yara gave an interview to a local news station. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "SEC just called. They want to talk to Anton tomorrow morning." Another buzz. "Breaking news. Local businessman under investigation for financial fraud." And another. "Phoenix Rise stock jumps 15%, following charitable announcement." Ruby appeared with champagne. "To karma?" "To second chances," I corrected, raising my glass. "And to women who rise." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the city. Somewhere out there, Anton was facing the consequences of his actions. But in here, surrounded by the positive energy of transformation and hope, I finally felt free. The phoenix had risen from the ashes, and this time, she'd brought an entire sisterhood with her. The autumn breeze carried the sound of laughter from the shelter's garden, where dozens of women gathered for the grand reopening ceremony. I stood at the back, watching Yara lead a group tour through the newly renovated facilities. "And here's our Career Development Center," she explained, gesturing to a bright room filled with computers. "Every woman deserves the chance to rebuild her life on her own terms." Ruby appeared beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Have you seen the morning news? About Anton. Hard to miss." The headlines had been everywhere. "Local businessman pleads guilty to financial fraud." Anton had taken a plea deal, avoiding jail time, but accepting hefty fines and community service. His reputation was in tatters, his business contacts gone. "Jacqueline," a soft voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find Maria, one of the shelter's residents, holding a small gift bag. "We wanted you to have this." Inside was a handmade phoenix pendant, crafted from copper wire and colored glass. "We all made one in art therapy," Maria explained. "It reminds us that we can rise from anything." Before I could respond, Nathan rushed over. "You need to see this," he said, holding up his tablet. On the screen was a social media post from Anton. "To everyone I've hurt through my actions, I'm sorry. Especially to Jacqueline and Yara. You turned my biggest mistakes into something meaningful. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm grateful for the lesson." "Wow," Ruby whispered. Hell really did freeze over. Victoria joined our group, reading over Nathan's shoulder. "Too little, too late." "Maybe not," I said, watching Rosalind lead another group of women through the garden. "Sometimes late is better than never." The ceremony continued with speeches and testimonials. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd, survivors, supporters, journalists, and even a few familiar faces from my past. 5 years ago, I stood in these gardens, broken and lost. Today, I stand here whole, surrounded by an army of phoenixes. I touch the pendant at my neck. We're not defined by who hurt us, but by how we rise above that hurt. And we rise higher when we rise together. After the ceremony, Yara pulled me aside. "There's someone who wants to meet you." She led me to a young woman sitting alone in the garden. "This is Lily. She left her husband last week after finding out about his affair with her cousin." The woman looked up, tears in her eyes. "Yara told me your story, how you turned your pain into power. I need to know how." I sat beside her, taking her trembling hands in mine. "First, you need to know something. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning." "But it hurts so much." "Pain is fuel," I said, remembering my own darkest days. The trick is choosing what to do with it. Ruby appeared with a Phoenix Rise gift bag. Maybe start with this. Our healing serum works wonders on crying-induced puffy eyes. Trust me, I helped develop it. Lily managed a small laugh, and something in my heart settled. This was why everything had happened, not for revenge, but for moments like this. Later, as the sun set over the garden, I found myself alone by the fountain. The water sparkled with coins, wishes made by women dreaming of better tomorrows. Making a wish? Nathan asked, joining me. I don't need to anymore. I pulled out a familiar object from my purse, the watch I'd taken back from Anton years ago. But someone else might. I handed it to Nathan. Have it engraved with "Time heals all wounds" and add it to the shelter's fundraising auction. Poetic, he smiled. You know, when you first told me your revenge plan, I thought you were making a mistake. But this... He gestured to the thriving shelter, the laughing women, the new beginnings blooming everywhere. This is better than revenge. It's justice, Ruby added, appearing with Yara. Sweet, constructive justice. The four of us stood there, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. A phoenix sunset, I thought. My phone buzzed with a message from Rosalind. 3 more women just checked in. They saw the news coverage. They're ready to rise. I smiled, touching the phoenix pendant at my neck. Some people might call it karma, others might call it justice. But standing there, surrounded by the evidence of pain transformed into purpose, I knew what it really was. It was hope, rising from the ashes of despair, spreading its wings to shelter others in their darkest hours. And that was the sweetest victory of all.
My name is Hannah, and this is the story of how my life took an unexpected turn after I married the love of my life, Michael. We met during our college years and fell deeply in love. Michael was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner, kind, supportive, and with a wicked sense of humor that never failed to make me laugh. My first meeting with Michael's parents, Robert and Helen, was cordial enough. Robert, a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes, greeted me with a warm handshake. Helen, on the other hand, was more reserved. She offered a tight-lipped smile and a quick nod, her eyes scrutinizing me from head to toe. "So, you're the girl who's stolen our Michael's heart," Helen said, her tone carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place at the time. "I hope you know how lucky you are." "I do," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Michael's an incredible person." "Yes, he is," Helen agreed, her eyes never leaving mine. "I raised him to be that way." As the evening progressed, I found myself gravitating towards Robert. He was easier to talk to, asking me about my job as a speech therapist and showing genuine interest in my responses. Helen, meanwhile, seemed more interested in regaling us with stories of Michael's childhood achievements and his sister Olivia's budding modeling career. "Olivia's doing so well in Milan," Helen boasted. "She's dating an Italian entrepreneur now." "Such a catch." I nodded politely, unsure of how to respond. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support that I appreciated more than he knew. The first few months of our marriage were blissful. Michael and I settled into our new home, a cozy apartment in the heart of the city. We spent our weekends exploring local cafes, going on hikes, and simply enjoying each other's company. I threw myself into my work at the speech therapy clinic, finding immense satisfaction in helping children overcome their communication challenges. But as time went on, the cracks in my relationship with Helen began to show. It started with unannounced visits to our apartment. She'd show up at odd hours, always with some flimsy excuse. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Helen showed up unannounced yet again. I was in the middle of cleaning our apartment, my hair tied back in a messy bun and wearing old clothes. "Oh my," Helen exclaimed, her eyes widening in mock surprise. I didn't realize we were going for the shabby chic look these days. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that she was still Michael's mother. "I'm just doing some cleaning, Helen." "What brings you by?" She ignored my question, pushing past me into the living room. "Cleaning?" Well, you could have fooled me. Look at this dust. She ran a perfectly manicured finger along our bookshelf, holding it up for inspection. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, walked by our open door. Helen's voice carried, ensuring that every word was audible in the hallway. Really, Hannah, Helen continued, her voice dripping with disdain. I don't know how Michael puts up with this. When I was a young wife, I kept our home spotless. But then again, I didn't have the luxury of gallivanting off to work every day. My job is not a luxury, Helen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's a career I'm passionate about. Helen scoffed. Passion doesn't keep a home, dear. Speaking of which, where is Michael? Working late again? Or perhaps elsewhere? The implication in her tone was clear, and it took every ounce of self-control not to lash out at her. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, Michael is at the gym. He'll be home soon. Helen mused, a sly smile playing on her lips. Well, I suppose we'll see. I nodded politely, biting back the retort that threatened to escape my lips. Just then, Michael walked in, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. Mom, he said, surprise evident in his voice. What are you doing here? Just checking in on you too, Helen replied sweetly. Someone has to make sure you're being taken care of properly. Michael's eyes darted between Helen and me, sensing the tension. Hannah takes great care of me, Mom. And I take care of her. We're a team. Helen's smile tightened. Of course, dear. Well, I should be going. Don't forget about dinner next week. As soon as the door closed behind her, I collapsed onto the couch, tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. I'm so sorry, Hannah, Michael said, sitting beside me and pulling me into his arms. I'll talk to her again. This has to stop. Little did I know that our lives were about to change in ways we couldn't have imagined. A few weeks later, I missed my period. At first, I dismissed it as stress, but as the days went by, I couldn't ignore the possibility any longer. With shaking hands, I took a pregnancy test. Those 2 minutes felt like an eternity, but when I finally looked at the stick, there it was, 2 pink lines. I was pregnant. When I told Michael about the pregnancy, his face lit up with pure joy. He swept me into his arms, spinning me around our living room. We're going to be parents, he exclaimed, his eyes shining with happy tears. I can't believe it, Hannah. This is amazing. However, the blissful bubble burst when we realized we had to share the news with Michael's parents. I hoped, perhaps naively, that the prospect of a grandchild might soften Helen's attitude towards me. We decided to tell them over dinner at their house. As we sat around the dining table, Michael cleared his throat and squeezed my hand under the table. Mom, Dad, he began, his voice filled with excitement. We have some wonderful news. Hannah's pregnant. Robert's face broke into a wide grin. That's fantastic, he exclaimed, reaching across the table to pat Michael's shoulder. Congratulations, both of you. Helen, on the other hand, remained eerily silent. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Well, she finally said, her voice devoid of any warmth, I suppose congratulations are in order. I do hope you're prepared for the responsibility, Hannah. Children are a full-time job, you know. The tension in the room was palpable. Robert, sensing the growing discomfort, tried to steer the conversation to safer waters, asking about our plans for the nursery and if we had thought about names yet. As the weeks passed, my body began to change. Morning sickness hit me hard, and there were days when I could barely drag myself out of bed. Despite feeling awful, I pushed myself to keep up with my work and household chores, determined not to give Helen any ammunition. One particularly rough evening, Helen showed up unannounced at our apartment. I had just returned from work and was exhausted, my feet swollen and my back aching. Oh my, Helen said as she walked in, her eyes roving over my disheveled appearance. You look absolutely dreadful, Hannah. Are you sure you're taking proper care of yourself? And the house, well, it's seen better days, hasn't it? I bit my lip, fighting back tears of frustration. I'm doing my best, Helen. Pregnancy isn't easy. She waved her hand dismissively. Nonsense. Women have been having babies for millennia. There's no need to make such a fuss about it. When I was pregnant with Michael, I never let it interfere with my duties. As she continued to criticize everything from the state of our laundry to the contents of our fridge, I felt something inside me snap. Helen, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. I appreciate your concern, but I'm tired, I'm nauseous, and quite frankly, I don't need this right now. If you can't be supportive, I think it's best if you leave. Helen's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. Well, I never, she huffed. Is this how you speak to your elders? To family? Michael will be hearing about this, mark my words. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, our lives took another unexpected turn. One rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang insistently. I opened it to find Olivia, Michael's sister, standing there with puffy eyes and a suitcase at her feet. Olivia? I gasped. What's wrong? She burst into tears and fell into my arms. It's Marco, she sobbed. I had to leave him. He was cruel to me. I barely escaped with my life. I ushered her inside, my mind reeling. Olivia had always seemed to have the perfect life, a successful modeling career, a wealthy husband, a glamorous existence in Italy. But as she poured out her story, a very different picture emerged. He used me, Olivia choked out. He never helped with anything, never gave me money. And now? She placed a hand on her stomach, and I realized with a start that she was pregnant. Helen arrived shortly after, having been called by Olivia. She swept in like a hurricane, all concern for her daughter and venom for the absent Marco. Don't worry, darling, she cooed to Olivia. We'll take care of everything. A few weeks later, I gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Emma. Helen barely acknowledged Emma's arrival, her attention entirely focused on Olivia, who gave birth to a son, Luca, just 2 weeks after me. Helen was ecstatic about her grandson, lavishing him with attention and gifts, while barely sparing a glance for Emma. As the months passed, a clear pattern emerged in our household. Olivia, encouraged by Helen, became increasingly self-indulgent. She spent her days at beauty salons, getting massages and treatments, obsessing over regaining her pre-pregnancy figure. She made no effort to find a job, instead living off her parents' generosity. Before we knew it, it was time for the children to start school. Emma and Luca ended up in the same class, a situation that only highlighted Helen's blatant favoritism. She would pick up Luca from school, often leaving Emma behind for me to collect after work. At school events, Helen made it clear she was there only for Luca, barely acknowledging Emma's presence. One day, Helen fell ill. Olivia, unwilling to disrupt her beauty routine, turned to me. Hannah, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. You'll need to pick up Luca, make his lunch, help with his homework, and get him ready for his school play. Mom can't do it, and I have appointments. I was taken aback by her presumption, but found myself agreeing. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to punish Luca for his mother and grandmother's behavior. He was a sweet boy, after all, and not to blame for the adults' actions. When Helen recovered, I thought things would return to their usual pattern. Instead, she approached me with an outrageous demand. Hannah, she began, her tone sickly sweet. Now that you've seen how much work it is to care for Luca, I'm sure you understand why Olivia needs help. We think it's only fair that you contribute to his school fees. And you'd be helping out a single mother. I was stunned into momentary silence, then felt a surge of anger. Absolutely not, I said firmly. Helen, I have my own child to support. If Olivia needs help, she should consider getting a job. Fuming, Helen stormed off to complain to Michael. To my immense relief, he backed me up completely. He put her in her place and making it clear that her demands were unacceptable. The day of the school's drawing contest arrived. Emma had been working tirelessly on her artwork for weeks, pouring her heart and soul into each piece. Her excitement was palpable as she carefully packed her drawings into her school bag the night before. That morning, as we were getting ready to leave, Helen unexpectedly showed up at our door. "I thought I'd take the children to school today," she announced, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes plastered on her face. "Really, Grandma? You'll take me?" Emma asked, her eyes shining with hope. "I received a call from Emma's teacher just before lunch." "Mrs. Johnson? There's been an incident with Emma's artwork for the contest. I think you should come to the school." My heart racing, I rushed to the school. I found Emma in her classroom, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by her ruined artwork. Each carefully crafted drawing was soaked through with what appeared to be orange juice, the colors running together in a heartbreaking mess. "Mommy," Emma sobbed as she saw me. "Grandma did it. She put juice in my bag on purpose." I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut. Leaving Emma in the care of her sympathetic teacher, I drove straight to Helen and Robert's house, my hands shaking with anger as I gripped the steering wheel. I burst into their living room, where I found Helen calmly sipping tea. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. "Emma's artwork. The juice. She told me what you did." Helen's face hardened. "I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Children have such vivid imaginations, don't they?" Just then, Luca piped up from the corner of the room where he'd been playing quietly. "But Grandma, I saw you put the juice in Emma's bag. You said it was a surprise for her." The room fell silent. Robert, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward, his face a mask of shock and disappointment. "Helen, is this true?" Caught out, Helen's demeanor changed instantly. Her eyes flashed with defiance. "So what if I did? It's not fair that Emma gets to participate in the contest when Luca didn't enter. I was just evening the playing field." Robert exploded. "Have you lost your mind, Helen? How could you do such a thing to our granddaughter?" As Robert continued to berate Helen, Olivia burst into the room. Taking in the scene, she immediately rushed to Helen's side. "How dare you all gang up on Mom like this?" she shrieked. "Get out, Hannah. You're not welcome here." Stunned by this turn of events, I left the house in a daze. I drove home in silence, my mind reeling from what had transpired. When Michael came home that evening, I recounted the day's events. His face paled, then flushed with anger as I told him what his mother had done. "That's it," he said, his voice hard with resolve. "We're done. No more contact with Mom or Olivia. I won't have them hurting you or Emma anymore." A few months after the art contest incident, Emma came home buzzing with excitement about an upcoming weekend school trip. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself looking forward to this opportunity for her to create happy memories with her classmates. However, my joy was short-lived when I learned that Olivia was in charge of collecting payments for the trip. I made the payment promptly, making sure to get a receipt and even taking a screenshot of the bank transfer, just in case. The morning of the trip arrived, and Emma was up at dawn, her small suitcase packed and ready by the door. We arrived at school early, Emma practically bouncing with anticipation. But as we approached the bus, I saw Olivia standing there with a clipboard, and my heart sank. "Name?" Olivia asked coldly as we reached her. "Emma Johnson," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Olivia made a show of scanning her list. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But I don't have any record of payment for Emma. She can't go on the trip." Emma's face fell, and I felt a surge of anger. "That's impossible," I insisted. "I paid weeks ago. I have the receipt and bank transfer to prove it." Olivia shrugged. "I don't know what to tell you, Hannah. If it's not on my list, it's not paid." Emma started to cry, and I felt helpless. The teacher, Mrs. Anderson, approached us, concern etched on her face. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked. I explained the situation, and Mrs. Anderson looked troubled. "I'm so sorry, but if the payment isn't recorded, I can't let Emma on the bus. It's school policy." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "If you'd like, Emma could still come along. I'd be happy to cover her expenses privately." While I appreciated Mrs. Anderson's kindness, I couldn't accept. This wasn't about money, it was about principle. I thanked her but declined, then stepped away to call Michael. When I explained what was happening, Michael was furious. "Don't worry," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm on my way. I'll meet you all at the campsite and pay for Emma's stay directly. She's not missing this trip." Relieved, I turned back to Emma and Mrs. Anderson. "Emma will be joining you at the campsite," I said, loud enough for Olivia to hear. "Her father will meet you there to sort out any payment issues." True to his word, Michael met the school group at the campsite and paid for Emma's stay. Our daughter ended up having a wonderful time, making new friends and enjoying the outdoor activities. But Michael and I weren't about to let Olivia's actions slide. As soon as Emma returned home, we went to the police station. The investigation was swift. It turned out that Olivia had indeed received our payment but had deliberately omitted Emma from the list of paid participants. She was forced to return the money and faced potential legal consequences for her actions. The rift in our family seemed irreparable now, but at least we were taking a stand. Just when we thought the drama had settled, my phone rang. It was my father-in-law, his voice tight with concern. "Hannah, I've heard some disturbing things about the school trip incident. Can you and Michael come over? We need to talk." When we arrived, Robert ushered us into his study, his face grave. "Tell me everything," he said. We recounted the entire story, from Olivia's manipulation of the trip payments to our visit to the police station. Robert listened intently, his expression darkening with each detail. To our surprise, Robert picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Marco? It's Robert, Olivia's father. I need to know the truth about your divorce." Michael and I sat in stunned silence as Robert put the phone on speaker. Marco's accented voice filled the room. "Mr. Johnson, I've been waiting for this call," Marco said, sounding weary. "The truth is, Olivia was not the victim she claimed to be. She had constant tantrums, was pathologically jealous, and spent money like water. But the final straw was when I caught her with another man. I had no choice but to end our marriage." Robert's face paled. "But what about child support? Olivia said you refused to pay." Marco's laugh was bitter. "Refused? I pay a substantial amount every month. I'm shocked to hear you've been covering expenses. I assumed that money was going towards Luca's care." At that moment, Helen burst into the room, her face contorted with rage. She snatched the phone from Robert's hand. "How dare you spread such lies about my daughter?" she shrieked into the phone. "You're obligated to support her and Luca, do you hear me? Every penny." Robert wrestled the phone back, ending the call. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by Helen's heavy breathing. "Helen," Robert said, his voice dangerously calm, "get Olivia in here. Now." Minutes later, Olivia flounced into the room, designer shopping bags in hand. Her smug expression faltered as she took in the serious faces around her. "Olivia," Robert began, "we know everything. The lies about Marco, the money, the cheating. It stops now. You're going to get a job, starting tomorrow. No more handouts, no more luxury shopping trips." Olivia's shock quickly turned to anger. "You can't do this to me," she screeched. "Mom, tell him." Helen immediately jumped to Olivia's defense. "Robert, you're being ridiculous. Our daughter needs our support." Robert stood up, his patience finally snapped. "Enough," he roared. "This is my house, and I've had it with both of you. You're both leaving, now. And Helen, consider this the end of our marriage. I want a divorce." The room erupted into chaos. Olivia and Helen screamed and pleaded, but Robert stood firm. Michael and I sat in shocked silence, watching as years of manipulation and lies finally came crashing down. In the months following the dramatic confrontation at Robert's house, our lives underwent significant changes. Robert, true to his word, filed for divorce from Helen. Despite her manipulative behavior, he provided her with a fair compensation package, hoping it would give her a fresh start. However, we soon learned that Helen had handed over most of the money to Olivia, who quickly squandered it on luxury items and frivolous expenses. It wasn't long before they both found themselves in dire financial straits. Marco, having learned the truth about Olivia's deception, fought for full custody of his son. The court proceedings were intense, with Marco presenting evidence of Olivia's unstable lifestyle, her unemployment, and her lack of permanent residence. To our amazement, the American courts ruled in Marco's favor. Luca was to be returned to Italy to live with his father. It was a bittersweet moment. While we were relieved that Luca would be raised in a more stable environment, our hearts ached for the little boy who had to leave behind the only home he'd known. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a new normal. Emma was thriving in school, and Michael and I were enjoying the peace that came with having distance from Helen and Olivia. Robert became a frequent visitor, clearly relishing his role as a doting grandfather to Emma. Then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at our door. I opened it to find Helen standing there, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen her. "Hannah," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." Warily, I let her in. She sat on our couch, wringing her hands nervously. "I've made so many mistakes," Helen said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I realize now how terribly I've treated you and Emma. I miss my granddaughter so much. Please, I want to make amends. I want to help raise Emma, to be a proper grandmother to her. I was hoping, maybe I could come live with you and Michael?" I listened to her plea, feeling a mix of emotions, pity, anger, and a deep-seated weariness. But as I looked at her hopeful face, I knew what I had to do. "No, Helen," I said firmly. "After everything you've done, I can't allow you back into our lives, especially not Emma's. You've shown time and time again that you can't be trusted. I won't risk my daughter's well-being or happiness." Tears streaming down her face, Helen stumbled to the door. As she left, Michael arrived home. He took in the scene with a questioning look. I explained what had happened, and Michael pulled me into a tight embrace. "You did the right thing," he assured me. "We have to put Emma first." In the weeks that followed, we learned that Helen had found a small apartment and taken a job as a sales clerk in a local store. It was a far cry from her previous lifestyle, but it was an honest living. Robert became a constant presence in our lives, making up for lost time with Emma and forming a beautiful grandfather-granddaughter relationship. The pain of the past few years began to fade, replaced by the joy of our tight-knit family. My name is Chloe, and a year ago, I married the love of my life, Jack. Our relationship was everything I'd ever dreamed of, loving, supportive, and full of laughter. I couldn't have been happier with my family life. I worked as an accountant, mostly from home. It was a job I enjoyed, though there was more to my professional life than met the eye. Jack ran his own car parts business, which kept him busy, but allowed us plenty of time together. We loved spending our free time with each other, often attending parties with Jack's large circle of friends, colleagues, and business partners. I always looked forward to these gatherings, relishing the chance to socialize and be part of Jack's world. One sunny Saturday morning, as I sat at our kitchen table sipping coffee and checking emails, Jack came in, grinning from ear to ear. "Hey, beautiful," he said, planting a kiss on my cheek. "Mike's throwing a barbecue at his place. Thought we could head over, have a few drinks, catch up with everyone. You up for it?" "Sounds perfect," I replied, already looking forward to the evening. We arrived at Mike's house around 7 p.m., the smell of grilled meat and the sound of laughter filling the air. As we made our way through the crowd, I noticed a striking blonde woman I'd never seen before. She was talking animatedly with a group of people, her laughter carrying across the yard. "Who's that?" I asked Jack, nodding in her direction. His face tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's Vanessa. My ex-girlfriend. Before I could respond, Mike spotted us and waved us over. "Jack, Chloe. Glad you could make it. Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." As we approached the group, Vanessa's eyes locked onto us. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "If it isn't Jack and his wife." The way she said wife made it sound like a dirty word. I forced a smile, determined not to let her get to me. "Nice to meet you, Vanessa," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Chloe." She looked at my hand as if it were covered in dirt, then turned back to Jack. "Jackie, darling, it's been too long. You must tell me all about what you've been up to." I bristled at her use of the pet name, but Jack smoothly intervened. "It's good to see you, Vanessa. Chloe and I have been great. How about you? Still working at your dad's company?" Vanessa's smile faltered for a moment. "Oh, you know me. I like to keep my options open. Unlike some people, I'm not tied down." The conversation continued in this vein for what felt like hours, with Vanessa making thinly veiled jabs at me while fawning over Jack. I did my best to stay calm and collected, but by the end of the night, I was exhausted. In the weeks following that first encounter with Vanessa, I noticed her appearing more frequently at our social gatherings. Each time, she seemed to go out of her way to make me feel uncomfortable and out of place. One Friday evening, we were at a dinner party hosted by one of Jack's business associates. I was chatting with a few of the wives when Vanessa sauntered over, champagne flute in hand. "Oh, Chloe," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "That's an interesting outfit." I didn't realize the librarian look was back in style. I glanced down at my knee-length skirt and blouse, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I think it's appropriate for a dinner party," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Vanessa laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. "Of course you do, sweetie. Not everyone can pull off haute couture like moi." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that her dress looked more suitable for a nightclub than a dinner party. Instead, I excused myself and went to find Jack. As the weeks went by, Vanessa's behavior became increasingly bold. She started posting photos from our gatherings on social media, always making sure to crop me out or block my face. The captions were thinly veiled insults about my appearance or personality. One day, while scrolling through my feed, I came across a particularly nasty post. Vanessa had uploaded a photo of herself next to an unflattering picture of me. The caption read, "Who do you think is a better match for Jack? Vote in the comments." I felt my cheeks burn with anger and humiliation as I read through the comments, most of which were in Vanessa's favor. At the end of the post, she had added, "Looks like the people have spoken. Jack must be a complete fool to have chosen plain Jane over a beauty like me." That evening, when Jack got home from work, I decided to confront him about the situation. "Jack, we need to talk about Vanessa," I said as he walked through the door. He sighed, loosening his tie. "What's she done now?" I showed him the post on my phone. His face darkened as he scrolled through it. "This is unacceptable," he muttered. "I'll talk to her, tell her to take it down." "That's not enough," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I want you to tell her to stay away from us. I don't want her at our parties anymore." Jack ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "Chloe, I can't do that. She's the daughter of an important business partner. I can't just ban her from social events." "So what, I'm just supposed to put up with her bullying me?" I asked, my voice rising. "Of course not," Jack said, pulling me into a hug. "Look, I'll talk to her, make it clear that this behavior isn't okay. But you have to understand, I can't completely cut her out without risking my business relationships." I pulled away from him, frustration building inside me. "And what about our relationship, Jack? Doesn't that matter?" "Of course it does," he said, looking hurt. "You know you're the only one I love. Vanessa is in the past. I chose you, remember?" His words should have comforted me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of our problems. As I went to bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder, was our perfect life starting to crack at the seams? As the weeks passed, Vanessa's behavior became increasingly brazen. At every party or gathering, she seemed to make it her mission to get under my skin and closer to Jack. One particularly memorable evening, we were at a cocktail party hosted by one of Jack's colleagues. I had chosen a simple but elegant black dress for the occasion, feeling confident and comfortable. That feeling didn't last long. Vanessa sauntered into the room wearing a skin-tight red dress that left little to the imagination. Her eyes locked onto Jack immediately, and she made a beeline for us. "Jack, darling," she cooed, completely ignoring my presence. "You look absolutely dashing tonight." Before either of us could respond, she placed her hand on Jack's arm, stroking it lightly. "Care to dance with me? For old time's sake?" I felt my blood begin to boil, but Jack smoothly extricated himself from her grasp. "Thanks, Vanessa, but I'm here with my wife. Maybe another time." As we walked away, I couldn't help but feel a small thrill of victory. But it was short-lived. Throughout the night, I watched as Vanessa made repeated attempts to get Jack alone. She'd call him over to discuss business, or ask him to help her with some contrived problem. To his credit, Jack rebuffed her advances each time, always making sure to include me in the conversation or quickly returning to my side. But the constant attention was wearing on both of us. The next few weeks did not bring the desired relief. Vanessa's attempts to undermine our relationship became more frequent and more public. She'd post provocative comments on Jack's social media, always with a reminder of their shared history. At parties, she'd loudly reminisce about their time together, pointedly excluding me from the conversation. But it was at our friend Tom's birthday party that things really came to a head. Vanessa arrived fashionably late, wearing a dress that looked more appropriate for a red carpet than a backyard barbecue. As she made her entrance, she locked eyes with me and smirked. "Oh, Chloe," she called out, her voice dripping with false concern. "You poor thing. Didn't you get the memo? This isn't a library book club meeting." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Jack, who had been chatting with some colleagues, quickly made his way to my side. "That's enough, Vanessa," he said, his voice low and angry. "You need to stop this childish behavior." Vanessa's eyes widened in mock innocence. "Why, Jack, I'm just trying to help. Someone needs to show your little wife how to dress for these events." Before Jack could respond, I felt something cold and wet seep through my clothes. I looked down in shock to see red wine spreading across the front of my dress. Vanessa stood before me, empty glass in hand, her face a picture of feigned remorse. "Oh no," she gasped. "How clumsy of me. Although, to be honest, that stain is an improvement on that dreadful outfit." The party fell silent, all eyes on us. I stood there, wine dripping from my clothes, feeling humiliated and angry. But as I looked at Vanessa's smug face, something inside me snapped. "You know what, Vanessa?" I said, my voice steady and clear. "I'd rather wear this stained dress than spend another minute pretending to be civil with you. Your behavior is pathetic and embarrassing. If you'll excuse me, my husband and I are leaving." I turned to Jack, who was staring at Vanessa with a mixture of shock and disgust. "Let's go home," I said. As we walked towards the exit, I heard Vanessa's shrill voice behind us. "Jack, darling, don't go. Stay, and I'll take good care of you." Jack didn't even turn around. He put his arm around me and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "The only person I want taking care of me is my wife. Goodbye, Vanessa." As we drove home in silence, I couldn't help but feel that a line had been crossed. Vanessa had shown her true colors, and there was no going back. One sunny morning, Jack came into our bedroom with a serious expression on his face. "Chloe, I have to go on a business trip," he explained. "It's important for the company. I'll be gone for about a week." I nodded, trying to ignore the slight twinge of unease in my stomach. "Okay. When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning," he replied. "I'm sorry for the short notice." It came up suddenly. I forced a smile. It's fine. I understand. Your business is important. The next day, Jack left for his trip, and I found myself alone in our house. The week passed slowly, with me buried in work to distract myself from the emptiness of the house. On Friday evening, my phone rang. To my surprise, it was Vanessa. "Chloe, darling," her sickeningly sweet voice came through the speaker. "I'm organizing a little get-together tonight. Just a small group of 8. I'd love for you and Jack to come." I hesitated. Jack's out of town on business actually." "Oh, what a shame," Vanessa said, not sounding disappointed at all. "But you should still come. It'll be a great chance for us to bury the hatchet, start fresh. What do you say?" Every instinct told me to refuse, but a part of me was curious. "I'm not sure," I said hesitantly. "Oh, come on," Vanessa pressed. "It's at Le Chateau. You know the place, right? Very exclusive. It'll be fun, I promise." At the mention of Le Chateau, I felt a smile tug at my lips. "All right," I said, making a split-second decision. "I'll be there. What time?" "Wonderful," Vanessa exclaimed. 8 o'clock. Don't be late." At precisely 8 o'clock, I walked into Le Chateau. I saw a cheerful group of Jack's friends, 8 people including Vanessa, sitting at a table. For a moment, I thought everything might go well. But as I approached, my heart sank. There was no place set for me at the table. Vanessa stood up, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, Chloe," she said loudly, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. You see, we're full up here. No room for extras." She twirled, showing off her designer dress. "This is a place for people who belong, Chloe. Beautiful people. Successful people. Maybe you should try the diner down the street. I hear they do a mean hot dog." The table fell silent, everyone looking uncomfortable, but no one speaking up. I laughed, genuinely amused by Vanessa's pathetic attempt at humiliation. Then I turned and called out, "Excuse me, could I speak to the restaurant manager, please?" The restaurant manager approached our table, his demeanor professional and courteous. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking between Vanessa and me. Before Vanessa could speak, I smiled at the manager. "No problem at all. I was just wondering if I could join this lovely group for dinner." The manager smiled kindly at me. "Of course, madam. Let me get you a comfortable chair right away." As he hurried off, Vanessa's face contorted with rage. "Excuse me? I booked this table for 8 people. She wasn't invited, and there's no room for her here." The manager returned with a plush chair, placing it at the table. "I apologize for the confusion, but madam has the right to sit at any table she wishes. She is, after all, the owner of Le Chateau." A collective gasp went around the table. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, while Jack's friends looked at me in disbelief. One of them, Tom, spoke up. "But, Chloe, I thought you were an accountant? That's how Jack introduced you to us." I smiled, shrugging my shoulders modestly. "I am an accountant. I do the books for my restaurant. I've never been one to show off my wealth. I prefer to judge people by their character, not their bank account." Vanessa's face turned a deep shade of red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. The atmosphere at the table shifted dramatically. Jack's friends, who had been silent during Vanessa's tirade, now fell over themselves to invite me to join them. "Chloe, please, sit with us. We'd love to hear more about your restaurant. I can't believe we never knew this about you." I held up a hand, smiling gently. "Thank you all for the invitation, but I think I'll decline. I just wanted to stop by and say hello." I turned to the manager. "Please make sure my husband's friends are well taken care of. The bill is on me tonight." As I prepared to leave, I couldn't help but add, "And Vanessa? There's a lovely diner down the street. I hear they do a mean hot dog." You might want to try it sometime. With that, I left the restaurant, leaving behind a stunned silence and a thoroughly humiliated Vanessa. When Jack returned from his business trip a few days later, I told him about the incident over dinner. "You should have seen her face, Jack," I said, laughing. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone turn that shade of red before." Jack shook his head, chuckling. "I can't believe she thought she could embarrass you like that. You handled it perfectly, Chloe." As we finished our meal, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. Vanessa's attempt to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly, and in the process, it had brought Jack and me closer together. Several weeks flew by after the incident at Le Chateau. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, and the memory of Vanessa's humiliation had faded into an amusing anecdote Jack and I occasionally shared over dinner. One crisp autumn morning, as I was going through my emails, I noticed an intriguing message. It was an invitation to participate in the prestigious Entrepreneur of the Year award program, specifically in the Successful Entrepreneurial Debut category. My heart skipped a beat as I read the details. This was a significant recognition of my hard work and success with the restaurant. We decided to attend the event together. On the night of the awards, we dressed in our finest. Jack looked dashing in his tuxedo, and I chose an elegant, understated gown that made me feel confident and powerful. The venue was spectacular, filled with the city's most successful and influential people. As we mingled, I saw many familiar faces, friends, acquaintances, and several of Jack's business associates. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and excitement. At one point, Jack excused himself to chat with some colleagues, leaving me by the champagne fountain. I was admiring the intricate ice sculpture when a familiar voice hissed in my ear. "What are you doing here?" I turned to find Vanessa glaring at me, her face twisted with anger and disbelief. "I was invited," I replied calmly, showing her my invitation. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "This event is for the rich and successful people of this city. People like me and my father. You don't belong here, you upstart. How dare you try to infiltrate our world? Get out before you embarrass yourself." I remained calm, scanning the room until I spotted who I was looking for. With a smile, I waved to two distinguished-looking older gentlemen in impeccable suits who were engaged in conversation across the room. As they approached, Vanessa's tirade continued, but I ignored her, focusing on the men. When they reached us, I wrapped one of them in a warm embrace. "Dad, I'm so glad you could make it," I said, kissing his cheek. Turning to the other man, I extended my hand, which he shook warmly. "Mr. Thompson, it's wonderful to see you again." Vanessa's jaw dropped as she realized who the second man was. She turned to him, her voice shrill with disbelief. "Daddy? What are you doing? How can you possibly be friendly with this nobody? She's just an accountant who got lucky and is now pretending to be one of us. She doesn't belong in our world." Mr. Thompson's face flushed a deep red as he listened to his daughter's outburst. His eyes, usually calm and calculating, now blazed with fury. "Silence," he thundered, causing Vanessa to flinch. He gestured towards my father. "This man is William Carter, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country and my valued business partner. Your ignorant words could jeopardize a multi-million-dollar deal." Vanessa's eyes widened in shock, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her tirade. "Then cancel the deal, Daddy. We don't need to do business with her family. They're beneath us." Mr. Thompson's face mottled with rage, red spots appearing on his cheeks and forehead. His voice rose to a shout, causing heads to turn throughout the ballroom. "That's enough. Your behavior is inexcusable." He jabbed a finger at Vanessa. "From this moment, you're cut off. No more allowance, no more credit cards. And that luxury apartment you're so fond of? Consider yourself evicted." Vanessa's mouth gaped open in disbelief as her father turned to us, his tone suddenly apologetic. "Mr. Carter, Chloe, please accept my deepest apologies for this disgraceful scene." "Vanessa," he snapped, turning back to his daughter. "Leave immediately." You've proven yourself unworthy of being here." At that moment, Jack pushed through the crowd that had gathered around us, his face a mix of concern and anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Before anyone could respond, he caught sight of Vanessa and shook his head in disgust. "I should have known. Now I remember exactly why I broke up with you, Vanessa. You never learned how to behave in polite society." Vanessa's composure finally cracked. Tears began to stream down her face, leaving trails of mascara in their wake. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, reaching for Mr. Thompson's arm. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Please don't do this." But Mr. Thompson shrugged off her grasp. "I have business to discuss with my partners," he said coldly, turning his back on her. "Goodbye, Vanessa." As Mr. Thompson walked away with my father, Vanessa stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, her shoulders shaking with sobs, mascara streaking her cheeks. The crowd around us slowly dispersed, leaving her isolated in her humiliation. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. When it came time for the awards ceremony, I found myself walking onto the stage in a daze as my name was called for the Successful Entrepreneurial Debut category. As I accepted the award, I caught sight of my father and Jack in the audience. They were on their feet, applauding wildly, their faces beaming with pride. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and I felt a surge of joy and accomplishment wash over me. In the weeks following the awards ceremony, life settled into a new, pleasant rhythm. The golden statuette found its place on our mantelpiece, a quiet reminder of that eventful night. Jack and I continued to attend parties with his friends and business associates. Without Vanessa's toxic presence, these gatherings became noticeably more enjoyable. The atmosphere was lighter, the conversations more genuine, and the laughter more frequent. One evening, as we were getting ready for another social event, Jack came up behind me as I was putting on my earrings. "You know," he said, wrapping his arms around my waist, "I've noticed how much more fun these parties have become lately." I smiled at him in the mirror. I was just thinking the same thing. It's amazing how one person's absence can change the entire dynamic. Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Speaking of absence, have you heard anything about Vanessa lately?" I shook my head. "Not really. She seems to have vanished completely. Although, well, I overheard Tom talking to his wife at the last party. Apparently, there's a rumor going around that Mr. Thompson sent Vanessa to another state. Something about not wanting her to embarrass him or the family business anymore." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Wow, that's pretty drastic. But I can't say I'm surprised after her behavior at the awards ceremony." I turned to face him, adjusting his tie. "It's a shame, really. All that privilege, and she never learned to appreciate it or use it wisely." As we drove to the party, I reflected on how much my life had changed in the past year. From the challenges with Vanessa to the unexpected recognition of my business acumen, it had been a whirlwind of experiences. Yet through it all, my relationship with Jack had only grown stronger. And as for Vanessa? Well, I genuinely hoped she'd find her way eventually. After all, everyone deserves a chance to grow and become a better version of themselves. Who knows? Maybe her fresh start in a new state would be just what she needed. For now, though, I was content to enjoy this moment, swaying in my husband's arms, surrounded by friends, grateful for the life we'd built together. My name's Sarah, and I'm about to turn 20. Right now, I'm knee-deep in finals week at college, where I'm studying finance. It's a tough major, but I've always had a knack for numbers. As I sit here in my dorm room, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups, I can't help but think about my upcoming birthday. My family's planning to celebrate it once I finish my exams. Family celebrations, they always leave a bitter taste in my mouth. Growing up, I always felt like the black sheep. My older sister, Emma, is 25 now. She's always been the golden child, the one my parents doted on. Me? I was just there. An afterthought. I remember this one time when I was 8. It was Emma's 13th birthday, and my parents threw her this massive party. There was a bouncy castle, a magician, and a cake bigger than me. I was so excited, thinking my birthday would be just as grand. When my birthday rolled around a few months later, all I got was a small cake from the grocery store and a pair of socks. I tried not to cry, but I couldn't help it. My mom just patted my head and said, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. It's just a birthday." That's when I first realized I was different. Less important, somehow. As I grew older, the feeling only intensified. Emma got the newest phone every year, while I inherited her old ones. She got designer clothes, I got hand-me-downs. When she graduated high school, my parents bought her a car. When I graduated, they gave me a gift card to the local bookstore. My grandmother, though? She's different. She's always treated me like I was special. When I told her I wanted to study finance, she was thrilled. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Sarah," she said. "You'll go far." And now, she's insisted on arranging my birthday celebration. She even gave my parents several $1,000s to make it happen. I was shocked when I heard about it. My parents usually brush off my birthdays, but they didn't argue with Grandma. They just took the money and told me to focus on my exams. I overheard Emma throwing a fit about it. "Why does she get a big party?" she whined. "I could use that money for a trip I've been wanting to take." Grandma shut her down quick. "Hush now, Emma. Everyone spoils you as it is. Didn't I just give you 10 grand for rent? And you're still living at home." Emma went quiet after that. I couldn't help but feel a little smug. So here I am, cramming for my last exam. It's tomorrow, and then I'm free. Free to celebrate my birthday, free to feel special for once. The next day, I walked out of my last exam feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My classmates were chattering excitedly about summer plans, but all I could think about was my upcoming birthday celebration. As I made my way back to my dorm, my phone buzzed with messages. My college friends were wishing me an early happy birthday, knowing I'd be heading home soon. It felt good to be remembered, even if it was just by people I'd known for a couple of years. "Happy almost birthday, Sarah," my roommate, Jess, called out as I entered our shared space. "You ready for the big family shindig?" I nodded, trying to muster up some enthusiasm. "Yeah, should be interesting." Jess raised an eyebrow. "You don't sound too excited. Everything okay?" I sighed, flopping onto my bed. "It's just, my family. They're not exactly the warm and fuzzy type, you know? Especially when it comes to me. But your grandma organized this whole thing, right? That's gotta count for something," Jess pointed out. "True," I admitted. "Grandma's always been different. She actually seems to like me." As I packed my backpack for the trip home, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was a mix of hope and dread, hope that for once, my birthday would be special, and dread that somehow, it would all go wrong. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. My mind kept wandering to what awaited me. Would the house be decorated? Would there be a cake? Would my parents actually look happy to see me? As I walked up the driveway, I took a deep breath. The house looked normal. No balloons, no streamers, nothing to indicate a celebration was about to happen. But maybe they were keeping it all inside, I thought, trying to stay positive. I opened the front door, calling out, "Mom? Dad? I'm home." The house was quiet. Too quiet for a place that was supposed to be prepping for a party. I frowned, dropping my backpack by the door and making my way to the living room. My parents were there, sitting on the couch, looking oddly uncomfortable. There was no sign of any party preparations. Hi," I said, confusion creeping into my voice. "Where's all the, birthday stuff?" My mom and dad exchanged a glance that made my heart sink. "About that, Sarah," my dad started, his voice oddly detached. "We decided not to organize your birthday party." I blinked, sure I had misheard. "What? But Grandma gave you money for it. We gave the money to Emma for her trip, my mom cut in. She and her boyfriend flew to Hawaii a couple of days ago. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my eyes start to sting with tears. You what? But it was for my birthday. Grandma gave it to you for my birthday. My dad shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Emma needed a vacation. You understand, don't you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Understand? No, I don't understand. It was supposed to be my birthday party. I invited people. What am I supposed to tell them? We've already taken care of that, my mom said, her tone dismissive. We called everyone and told them you were having problems with college and that the party was cancelled. I stood there, shock giving way to anger. You lied to them? About me? How could you do this? My dad's face hardened. That's enough, Sarah. You need to learn to obey us and stop being so selfish. Selfish? I almost screamed the word. How am I being selfish? It was my birthday, my party. Just then, the front door opened. I turned, hoping it was Emma, back early and feeling guilty. Instead, I saw my grandmother step inside, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. What's going on here? She asked, her voice sharp. Where's the party? I looked at my parents, waiting to see how they'd explain this away. They hesitated, fumbling for words. In that moment, something in me snapped. There is no party, Grandma, I said, my voice shaking. They gave the money to Emma for a trip to Hawaii instead. The look on my grandmother's face was one I'd never seen before. It was a mix of fury and disappointment, all directed at my parents. Is this true? She demanded. My parents couldn't meet her gaze. Their silence was all the confirmation she needed. Grandma turned to me, her expression softening. Sarah, dear, go pack your things. You're coming with me. I didn't need to be told twice. As I rushed to throw some clothes into my backpack, I could hear my grandmother's voice, low and angry, talking to my parents. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. When I came back downstairs, Grandma was waiting by the door. Without a word to my parents, we left the house and got into her car. As we drove away, I finally let the tears fall. 20 years of feeling unloved and unwanted came pouring out. Grandma reached over and patted my hand. Don't you worry, dear, she said, her voice gentle but firm. We'll sort this out. You deserve better than this, and it's high time someone showed you that. Grandma drove us to her house, a beautiful 2-story home on the outskirts of town. As we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me with a determined look in her eyes. This might not be the party you were expecting, Sarah, but we're going to celebrate your birthday properly. Once inside, Grandma immediately got on her phone. I watched in amazement as she ordered what sounded like enough food to feed an army, all for rush delivery. I hope you're hungry, she said with a wink as she hung up. We've got quite a feast coming our way. As we waited for the food to arrive, Grandma bustled around the kitchen, pulling out her best china and silverware. I offered to help, but she shooed me away. It's your birthday, dear. You just relax. So I sat at the kitchen table, watching her work. After a few minutes of silence, I couldn't hold back anymore. Grandma, I started, my voice small. Why don't they love me? She paused in her preparations, turning to face me with a sad look in her eyes. For a moment, she seemed to be wrestling with something internally. Then she sighed and sat down across from me. Oh, Sarah, she said, reaching out to take my hand. I suppose it's time you knew the truth. My heart started racing. The truth about what? Grandma took a deep breath. Your parents, they didn't want you to be born. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs as if I'd been punched. What? They thought Emma was enough, Grandma continued, her voice gentle but firm. But I convinced them to have you. Your mother, she had a difficult pregnancy, and the birth was complicated. She almost died. I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. So it's my fault? No, Grandma said forcefully. No, Sarah, it's not your fault at all. These things happen sometimes. But your mother, she tried to avoid you after that. And your father and Emma followed her lead. I sat there, stunned. All these years, I'd known something was off, but I'd never imagined this. Just then, the doorbell rang. Our food had arrived. As Grandma went to get it, I sat there, trying to process everything I'd just learned. The next few hours passed in a blur. Grandma and I ate our way through a ridiculous amount of food. She regaled me with stories from her youth, making me laugh, despite the heaviness in my heart. As the night wore on, I found myself relaxing, truly enjoying my birthday for the first time in years. As we were finishing up the last of the cake, Grandma's phone rang. She glanced at it, then back at me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "It's your sister," she said. "Shall we see what she has to say?" I nodded, curiosity getting the better of me. Grandma put the phone on speaker. "Hello?" Emma's voice came through, sounding panicked. "Grandma? Why is my card blocked? What's going on?" Grandma's voice was cool when she replied. "Hello, Emma. I see you've discovered there are consequences for your actions." "What? What actions? What are you talking about?" Emma's voice was rising in pitch. "Your behavior, and that of your parents, has been absolutely shameful," Grandma said firmly. "Taking money meant for your sister's birthday for your own selfish desires? I'm deeply disappointed in you." There was a pause, then Emma's voice came back, angry now. "Oh, come on. Mom and Dad did the right thing giving me that money. Sarah doesn't need some big party. You're just a crazy old woman who—" "That's quite enough," Grandma cut her off, her voice like steel. "I've heard all I need to hear." And with that, she hung up. I stared at her, wide-eyed. "Grandma, did you really block her card?" She nodded, a satisfied smile on her face. "I did. And your parents' account too. It's time they learned to stand on their own 2 feet." As if on cue, the phone started ringing again. This time, it was my parents. Grandma ignored it, turning back to me. "Now then," she said, as if we hadn't just dropped a bombshell on my family's finances. "How about we plan out the rest of your birthday week?" The days I spent with Grandma were like a dream, a stark contrast to the nightmare that had been my birthday. For once, I felt truly loved and appreciated. We went shopping, visited museums, and just enjoyed each other's company. But all good things must come to an end, and soon it was time for me to return to my dorm and focus on my summer classes. As I unpacked my bags in my small dorm room, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, seeing a flood of notifications, missed calls, and messages from my parents and Emma. With a sigh, I sat on my bed and started scrolling through them. The first one was from my mom. "Sarah, you need to talk to your grandmother right now. This is unacceptable." Then my dad. "We're your parents. You owe us your loyalty. Make her unblock our accounts." Emma's messages were even worse. "You little brat. Is this what you wanted? To ruin everything for us? We're stuck in Hawaii because of you. Fix this now." I felt my hands shaking as I read through them all. The audacity they had to demand my help after what they'd done was mind-boggling. I took a deep breath and typed out a response. "This is between you and Grandma. I won't get involved. Please don't contact me about this again." I hit send and then blocked their numbers, but the peace didn't last long. They started calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails filled with demands and insults. During one particularly nasty call that I mistakenly answered, my mother's words cut deep. "You ungrateful little trash," she spat. "I should have never given birth to you. I should have had an abortion instead." That was the last straw. I ended the call and blocked every number they tried to reach me from. Tears streamed down my face as I curled up on my bed, my mother's words echoing in my head. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my studies, trying to drown out the pain with textbooks and assignments. Occasionally, I'd call Grandma, seeking comfort in her calm, competent voice. "How are you holding up, dear?" she'd ask, her tone always warm and concerned. "I'm okay, Grandma," I'd reply, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "Just focusing on my classes." "That's my girl," she'd say, pride evident in her voice. "Remember, you're stronger than you know. Don't let them get to you." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. While my parents and sister had shown their true colors, Grandma had become my rock, my safe harbor in this storm. It was a crisp autumn day, about 2 months after the birthday fiasco. I was walking across campus, my mind preoccupied with an upcoming finance exam, when I heard someone call my name. "Sarah." I turned and froze. There, jogging towards me with a $1,000,000 smile, was Jake, my sister Emma's boyfriend. The same Jake who was with her in Hawaii. He was as handsome as ever, and I couldn't help but notice the envious glances from other girls as he approached. Before I could react, he swept me into a hug. I stood there, stiff and confused, as he pulled away, still grinning. "Jake, what are you doing here?" I managed to ask, acutely aware of the stares we were attracting. "I was hoping to run into you," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Can we talk?" "There's a cafe just off campus." Every instinct told me to say no, but curiosity got the better of me. "Okay, but I can't stay long." As we settled into a quiet corner of the cafe, Jake leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "Sarah, I need to tell you something important." I braced myself, expecting news about my family. What he said next, however, caught me completely off guard. "I want to date you," he blurted out, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I'm going to leave Emma. For you." I stared at him, mouth agape. "What? Jake, what are you talking about? You're with my sister." He shook his head, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've been in love with you for a long time, Sarah. I was only dating Emma to be close to you. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true." As he spoke, my mind raced. This didn't make any sense. Jake had never shown any interest in me before. In fact, he'd always seemed to barely notice my existence when he was around Emma. Something fishy was definitely going on here. I decided to play along, to see where this would lead. Forcing a shy smile, I said, "Wow, Jake. That's really sweet. I had no idea you felt that way." His face lit up, clearly encouraged by my response. "Really? So, what do you think? Would you give us a chance?" I pretended to consider it, then said, "This is a lot to take in. Can I have some time to think about it? Maybe we could meet again in a week." "Of course," Jake agreed eagerly. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait for you, Sarah." After he left, I remained at the cafe, sipping my coffee and turning the bizarre encounter over in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that this sudden declaration of love was connected to my grandmother's decision to cut off my family financially. But how? And what did Jake hope to gain? I had barely stepped out of the cafe, my head still spinning from Jake's bizarre declaration, when my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on the screen. With a deep sigh, I answered. "You backstabbing little trash." Emma's voice screeched through the speaker. "How could you do this to me?" I pulled the phone away from my ear, wincing at her volume. "Emma, what the hell are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, you home-wrecking slut." My patience snapped. "Shut up right now and explain what's going on, or I'm hanging up." There was a moment of stunned silence before Emma spoke again, her voice trembling with rage. "Jake just dumped me. He said he's going to date you instead. How could you?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What? Emma, I swear I had no idea." "Oh, don't act all innocent," she spat. "I bet you're thrilled about this, aren't you?" "Well, guess what?" He's only after you for Grandma's money. My mind reeled. Grandma's money? What are you talking about? Emma let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you don't know? Well, let me fill you in, little sister. Grandma's cutting Mom, Dad, and me out of her will. She's leaving everything to you. I leaned against a nearby wall, feeling dizzy. But, why would she do that? Because she found out about Mom and Dad's plan, Emma said, her voice dripping with resentment. They filed to have her declared mentally incompetent so they could take control of her assets. But the old bat caught wind of it somehow. I felt sick. They did what? You heard me, Emma sneered. And now we're all cut off. Except for you, of course. The perfect little heiress. The pieces started falling into place. So that's why Jake suddenly wants to date me? Because of Grandma's money? Bingo, Emma said. Give the girl a prize. God, that vile old woman. I hope she... I cut her off, my voice cold. Don't you dare finish that sentence, Emma. I don't know who's worse in this situation, you and our parents for trying to steal from Grandma, or Jake for being a gold-digging snake. Emma gasped. How dare you? No, how dare you? I shot back. All of you. You're all despicable. I don't want to talk to you anymore, Emma. Don't call me again. I hung up, my hand shaking. Tears pricked at my eyes, a mix of anger and hurt threatening to overwhelm me. How could my family do this? How could they be so cruel, so greedy? With shaking hands, I dialed Grandma's number. She answered promptly, her voice warm and comforting. Sarah, dear. Is everything all right? I took a deep breath. Grandma, I just found out about, well, everything. The inheritance, Mom and Dad trying to declare you incompetent. Is it true? There was a brief pause, then Grandma chuckled. Oh, my dear. I was wondering when you'd hear about all that drama. Yes, it's true. She proceeded to recount the tale, her voice filled with a mix of amusement and disappointment. You should have seen their faces when the commission showed up at my door. I invited them in for tea, answered all their questions, and even did a few Sudoku puzzles to prove my mental acuity. I couldn't help but smile, picturing the scene. So what happened? Well, Grandma continued. They left quite satisfied that I was of sound mind. Your parents' ridiculous claim was rejected, of course. After that, I had no choice but to protect my assets, and you, from their greed. I've left them the house, but the rest, well, that's all going to you, my dear. I felt overwhelmed. Grandma, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Sarah. Just promise me you'll use it wisely. I want you to take over the company one day, to build on what I've created. I promise, Grandma. I won't let you down. After that conversation, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. My family, if I could even call them that anymore, became strangers to me. I blocked their numbers, ignored their attempts to reach out. They had shown their true colors, and I wanted nothing to do with them. A week after my conversation with Jake, true to his word, he showed up again. His confident smile faltered when he saw the cold look in my eyes. Sarah, he began, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Save it, Jake, I spat. I know all about your little scheme. You and my sister deserve each other, you're both vile and mercenary. His facade crumbled instantly. You're making a big mistake, he sneered. You're a fool to refuse a guy like me. I couldn't help but laugh. A guy like you? You mean a gold digger with no moral compass? No, thanks. I think I'll pass. As he stormed off, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was free from the manipulation, the lies, the constant feeling of inadequacy that had plagued me for so long. Over the next few months, Grandma took me under her wing, teaching me the ins and outs of running a successful company. We spent weekends poring over financial reports, discussing business strategies, and planning for the future. You have a good head for business, Sarah, she'd often say, beaming with pride. "You're going to do great things." For the first time in my life, I felt truly valued, truly loved. The pain of losing my parents and sister still lingered, but it was overshadowed by the joy of finding my place in the world. My name's Elena, and I never thought my life would turn into such a roller coaster. I grew up in a regular family, nothing fancy. After college, I became a primary school teacher. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved working with kids. My world flipped upside down when I met Jason. God, he was handsome, tall, dark hair, eyes you could drown in. And rich. Like, crazy rich. His parents owned some big company, and he was their golden boy. We hit it off right away. Jason said he loved how down-to-earth I was. I thought it was sweet then. Looking back, I should have seen the red flag. Our whirlwind romance shocked everyone, especially his parents. They hated me from day one. I still remember the first time I met them. "So, Elena," Jason's mom said, eyeing me like I was something stuck to her shoe. "What did you say your father does?" "He's a plumber, ma'am," I replied. The look on her face, you'd think I'd said he was a professional dumpster diver. Jason's dad wasn't any better. "Teaching, huh? Not exactly a lucrative career, is it?" But Jason stood by me. "Mom, Dad, I love Elena. Deal with it," he said. We got married despite their objections. I moved into Jason's luxury apartment, feeling like Cinderella. Everything was perfect. I got pregnant pretty quick, and soon our son Michael was born. Jason's parents might have hated me, but they adored Michael. Maybe they thought he'd grow up to be more like them than me. Life settled into a routine. Jason worked as a financial director at his dad's company. I kept teaching and took care of our home. It wasn't always easy, juggling work and a baby, but I managed. One night, as I was putting Michael to bed, Jason came home late again. "Another long day?" I asked. He grunted, loosening his tie. "You wouldn't understand, Elena. It's complicated stuff." I tried to ignore the sting of his words. "Well, Michael missed you. He wanted you to read him a bedtime story." Jason sighed. "I'm tired, Elena. Can't you do it?" As I watched him walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between us. But I pushed those thoughts aside. We were happy, right? We had to be. This was the life I'd dreamed of. As time went on, I couldn't ignore the growing distance between Jason and me. He was staying later at work, having dinners out, and becoming more distant. I tried to convince myself it was just work stress, but deep down, I knew something was off. The breaking point came when I found out about the corporate party. I was folding laundry when my mother-in-law called. "Elena," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "I hope you're not planning to wear that horrid green dress to the party tonight." I froze. "What party?" There was a pause. "The company's annual gala." "Surely Jason told you?" My heart sank. "He must have forgotten," I mumbled. "Well," she sniffed, "perhaps it's for the best. These events require a certain sophistication. Goodness knows you struggle enough with the simple duties of being a financial director's wife." I hung up, my cheeks burning with humiliation. When Jason got home, I confronted him. "Why didn't you tell me about the party?" I demanded. He sighed, loosening his tie. "Look, Elena, these events, they're not really your scene. You're just too." He paused, searching for the right word. "Simple?" I supplied, my voice bitter. He shrugged. "You said it, not me." That night, as Jason left for the party in his tuxedo, I sat alone in our huge apartment, feeling more out of place than ever. Weeks passed, and Jason grew more distant. I threw myself into taking care of Michael and my teaching job, trying to ignore the growing pit in my stomach. One day, while cleaning Jason's home office, I noticed his laptop was open. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started browsing. What I found shattered my world. There, in black and white, was an email chain between Jason and someone named Vanessa. As I read, my hands shaking, I realized she was more than just a coworker. God, V, you were amazing last night, one email read. Elena doesn't even compare. Of course not, darling, Vanessa had replied. She's just a simple little teacher. How could she possibly satisfy someone like you? They mocked me mercilessly, calling me a klutz and a fool. I learned that Jason had been buying Vanessa expensive gifts I'd never received. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, tears streaming down my face. When I heard Jason's key in the lock, I quickly closed the laptop and wiped my eyes. He strolled in, reeking of expensive cologne. Hey, he said, barely glancing at me. I swallowed hard. How was work? Fine, he muttered, heading for the shower. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind racing with what I'd discovered. Jason stumbled in around dawn, looking disheveled and smelling of alcohol. I pretended to be asleep as he collapsed onto the bed. When he finally woke up, I was ready. I'd copied the incriminating emails onto a USB drive, which I now held in my trembling hand. Jason, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, we need to talk. He groaned, rubbing his eyes. What is it, Elena? I've got a killer headache. I plugged the USB into our TV and pulled up the emails. Care to explain this? Jason's eyes widened as he recognized the correspondence. Then, to my shock, he smirked. Well, he drawled. Looks like the simple little teacher did some snooping. How could you? I choked out, tears threatening to spill. I'm your wife, the mother of your child. He stood up, towering over me. And that's exactly the problem, Elena. You're a wife and a mother. But Vanessa? She's exciting, sophisticated. She satisfies me in ways you never could. I felt like I'd been slapped. So what now? Are you leaving me for her? Jason laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made me flinch. Leave you? Why would I do that? No, Elena, I'm going to keep seeing Vanessa. And you're going to put up with it. Like hell I will. I spat, finding a surge of anger I didn't know I had. You will, he said calmly. Because without me, what do you have? A teacher's salary? A crappy apartment? Face it, Elena, you need me. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. No, Jason, I said quietly. I don't need you. Not anymore. I grabbed Michael, who was thankfully still asleep, and headed for the door. Where do you think you're going? Jason called after me. To my parents, I shot back. Don't try to stop me. As I drove away, Michael stirring in his car seat, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain, I was done being Jason's simple little teacher. I arrived at my parents' modest house, tears streaming down my face. My mom opened the door, took one look at me and Michael, and ushered us inside without a word. Elena, sweetheart, what happened? She asked, once we were settled in the living room. Through sobs, I told them everything, the emails, the confrontation, Jason's cruel words. My dad's face grew stormy as I spoke. I'll kill him, he growled, starting to stand. No, Dad, I said, grabbing his arm. He's not worth it. I need to figure out what to do next. My mom hugged me tight. You'll stay here, of course. We'll help you with Michael. And we'll get you a good lawyer. As I lay in my childhood bed that night, Michael sleeping peacefully beside me, I realized this was just the beginning of a long, difficult journey. But for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I was free. The following weeks were a blur of lawyer meetings and tearful nights. Jason, true to form, wasn't going down without a fight. He hired the best divorce attorney in the city and was determined to make my life hell. He's trying to get full custody of Michael, my lawyer, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, told me one afternoon. He's claiming you're an unfit mother. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? How can he say that? Sarah sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. He's alleging that you're unstable, that you've neglected Michael. It's all nonsense, of course, but we need to be prepared for a tough battle. And a tough battle it was. Jason threw everything he had at me. He claimed I was mentally unstable, that I'd cheated on him, that I was a danger to Michael. Each lie felt like a knife to my heart. The day of the custody hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom, my hands shaking as Jason's lawyer painted me as a terrible mother. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "Mrs. Parker is clearly unfit to care for a child. She abandoned her marital home, taking the child with her without Mr. Parker's consent. She's unstable, prone to emotional outbursts." I wanted to scream, to tell the judge it was all lies. But Sarah had coached me well. I sat quietly, my face a mask of calm. When it was our turn, Sarah stood up. "Your Honor, my client is a dedicated mother and a respected teacher. Mr. Parker's claims are baseless and, frankly, malicious. We have character witnesses." The judge listened to both sides, his face impassive. When he finally spoke, I held my breath. "Having considered all the evidence," he said, "I find no reason to deny Mrs. Parker custody of Michael. Mr. Parker will have visitation rights and will pay alimony and child support." I let out a sob of relief. Jason's face twisted with fury, but I didn't care. I had one. Michael was staying with me. As we left the courthouse, Jason grabbed my arm. "This isn't over, Elena," he hissed. "I'll make you regret this." I yanked my arm away. "No, Jason. It is over. You lost. Deal with it." Walking away from him, head held high, I felt stronger than I had in years. But I knew this was just the beginning. Jason wasn't going to give up easily, and I needed to be prepared for whatever he might do next. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I threw myself into teaching, cherishing the moments with Michael, and slowly rebuilding my self-esteem. But Jason wasn't done with us yet. One sunny afternoon, as I was helping my mom prepare dinner, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jason standing there, a stunning blonde woman hanging on his arm. "Elena," he said, his voice sickeningly sweet, "I've come to see Michael. This is Vanessa, my fiancée." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. "Fiancé?" I managed to choke out. Vanessa smirked, her eyes roving over our modest home. "Yes, Jason and I are getting married." "Now, where's the little one?" "I'm dying to meet him." I wanted to slam the door in their faces, but I knew I had to be civil for Michael's sake. "Come in," I said through gritted teeth. As they entered, Vanessa wrinkled her nose. "My, what a quaint little kennel you have here," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. My parents, who had come to see what was going on, bristled at her words. "Now listen here, young lady," my dad started, but Jason cut him off. Now, he said condescendingly. "No need to get upset. We're all adults here, aren't we?" "Well, some of us more than others," he added, eyeing my parents with contempt. That was the last straw. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Excuse me?" Jason said, feigning surprise. "You heard me," I replied, my anger building. "Get out of my parents' house. You can see Michael another time, when you learn some respect." Vanessa laughed, a high, grating sound. "Oh, honey, don't you get it? Jason doesn't need your permission. He has rights, you know." I stepped closer to her, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I have the right to kick you out of this kennel, as you so charmingly put it. Now leave, before I call the police." Jason's face darkened. "You'll regret this, Elena. I'll take Michael away from you, just you wait and see." That night, after putting Michael to bed, I sat with my parents in the living room, my head in my hands. "What am I going to do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He's going to try to take Michael away, I just know it. My mom put her arm around me. We won't let that happen, sweetheart. We'll fight him every step of the way. My dad nodded, his face set with determination. I've got an idea, he said. Remember Alex, your old friend from school? The one who became a private detective? I nodded, not sure where he was going with this. Well, he continued. Maybe it's time we did some digging of our own. Find out what skeletons Jason and his new fiancée might have in their closets. I hesitated. It felt wrong, somehow, to stoop to Jason's level. But then I thought of Michael, of the threat to take him away, and I knew I had to do whatever it took to protect him. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Let's do it. Let's hire Alex. The next day, I called Alex. We hadn't spoken in years, but he agreed to meet me immediately when I explained the situation. We met at a small cafe, away from prying eyes. Elena, Alex said, giving me a warm hug. I'm so sorry you're going through this. I filled him in on everything, the affair, the divorce, Jason's threats. Alex listened intently, his brow furrowed. I'll take the case, he said finally. We'll find out what your ex and his new fiancée are really up to. Over the next few weeks, Alex worked tirelessly. I tried to focus on my life, teaching, caring for Michael, helping my parents, but I couldn't help checking my phone constantly for updates. Finally, Alex called me. Elena, you need to come to my office. Now. When I arrived, Alex's face was grim. I found some things, he said, and they're not pretty. He laid out a series of documents and photos. First, your ex's fiancée, Vanessa? She's not who she says she is. Her real name is Veronica Mills. She used to work as an escort. I gasped. Are you sure? Alex nodded. Positive. But that's not all. She's been involved in some serious corporate espionage. She's been leaking information from your in-laws' company to their competitors. My head was spinning. Does Jason know? I don't think so, Alex replied. But there's more. Jason himself has been embezzling from the company. He's been siphoning off funds for years. I sat back, stunned. This was bigger than I could have imagined. What do I do with this information? I asked. Alex leaned forward. That's up to you, Elena. But if I were you, I'd use it to protect yourself and Michael. As I left Alex's office, my mind was racing. I had the power to destroy Jason and Vanessa, or Veronica. But was that really what I wanted? The next day, I received an unexpected call. It was my mother-in-law. Elena, she said, her voice cold, we're having a small gathering for my birthday next weekend. We'd like you and Michael to come. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The information Alex had uncovered was burning a hole in my pocket. I knew that at this party, I'd have to decide whether to use it or not. I looked at a photo of Michael on my nightstand, his innocent smile beaming at me. Don't worry, sweetheart, I whispered. Mommy's going to make sure you're safe. With that thought, I began to plan. The party was just days away, and I needed to be prepared for anything. Jason and Vanessa wouldn't know what hit them. The day of my mother-in-law's birthday party arrived. I dressed Michael in his best clothes and put on a simple but elegant dress myself. As we drove to the luxurious house I once called home, I felt my stomach churning with nerves. The welcome we received was far from warm. My mother-in-law's eyes narrowed as she saw me. Elena, she said coolly. We invited you only because you're Michael's mother. Don't forget that. I nodded, swallowing my pride. I understand. Thank you for including us. The party was in full swing, the house filled with the chatter of high society. I stood in a corner, feeling out of place, while Michael played with his cousins. Suddenly, the room fell silent. Jason had entered, a stunning woman on his arm. My heart sank as I recognized Vanessa. Everyone, Jason announced, beaming. I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Vanessa. We're getting married next month. The room erupted in congratulations. My in-laws rushed forward, embracing Vanessa. "Oh, darling," my mother-in-law cooed. "We're so thrilled. You're exactly the kind of woman Jason needs. Such a wonderful education and pedigree." I saw her throw a pointed look in my direction. The implication was clear: unlike me, Vanessa was worthy of their son. Something snapped inside me. I stood up, clutching the folder Alex had given me. "Actually," I said loudly, "I have something to say." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. "This woman," I continued, my voice steady, "is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Veronica Mills. She's using her cousin's identity. She has no education to speak of and used to work as an escort." Gasps echoed through the room. Vanessa's face went pale. I wasn't done. "But that's not all. She's been leaking confidential information about your company to your competitors." My father-in-law's face turned purple. "What? Is this true?" "And Jason," I added, turning to my ex-husband, "has been embezzling from the company for years." Chaos erupted. Jason lunged at me, but was held back by other guests. "You lying scum," he yelled. My father-in-law's voice boomed over the commotion. "Enough," he turned to Vanessa. "Get out of my house, now. I'll see you in court." As Vanessa fled, he rounded on Jason. "You're fired. How dare you hire this woman without proper vetting? And stealing from your own family? You're a disgrace." In the midst of the uproar, my in-laws approached me. "Elena," my father-in-law said, his voice gruff. We owe you an apology. You've saved our company. We were wrong about you." I nodded, feeling a mix of vindication and exhaustion. "Thank you. But if you'll excuse me, I need to take my son home." As Michael and I left, I heard the continuing sounds of argument behind us. But for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The truth was out, and we could finally move forward. In the weeks following the dramatic revelation at my in-laws' party, life took on a whirlwind pace. The fallout was swift and severe. Vanessa, or rather, Veronica, was arrested for fraud and corporate espionage. The sight of her being led away in handcuffs was surreal, to say the least. Jason didn't fare much better. With his embezzlement exposed, he lost not only his job but also his fancy apartment. The last I heard, he'd moved to another state, tail between his legs. He calls Michael occasionally, but the conversations are always short and awkward. To my surprise, my relationship with my in-laws took a complete 180. They were genuinely remorseful for how they'd treated me, and as a gesture of gratitude for saving their company, they gifted me a small apartment. "It's the least we can do, Elena," my father-in-law said, handing me the keys. "We were wrong about you, and we're sorry." The apartment wasn't large or luxurious, but it was ours. Michael and I moved in, ready to start our new life. I threw myself back into teaching, finding joy in the simplicity of my work. Our life settled into a peaceful rhythm, free from the drama and tension that had plagued us for so long. But the story doesn't end there. Remember Alex, my detective friend? Well, after all the dust settled, we started talking more frequently. He had been my rock throughout the whole ordeal, offering support and helping with the move. One day, as we were unpacking boxes in my new apartment, Alex paused, a framed photo in his hand. "You know, Elena," he said, his voice soft, "you deserve so much better than what Jason put you through." I looked up, meeting his warm brown eyes. Something shifted between us at that moment. We started spending more time together, and gradually, our friendship deepened into something more. Alex was everything Jason wasn't: kind, attentive, and he absolutely adored Michael. Our first date was nothing fancy, just a picnic in the park with our kids. Alex has a son, Tommy, who's a year younger than Michael. The boys hit it off immediately, chasing each other around the playground while Alex and I talked. "I can't remember the last time I laughed this much," I told him as we watched the kids play. Alex smiled, taking my hand. You deserve to laugh, Elena. You deserve to be happy. As the weeks turned into months, Alex became a constant in our lives. He was there for Michael's first soccer game, cheering louder than anyone. He helped Michael with his science project, showing infinite patience as they built a model solar system. One night, as we sat on my small balcony after putting the boys to bed, Alex turned to me. Elena, he said, his voice serious. I want you to know. I'm in this for the long haul. You and Michael, you're not just some passing fancy for me. I love you both. Tears welled up in my eyes. We love you too, Alex. You and Tommy, you've made our lives whole again. As we sat there, hand in hand, watching the stars, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in years, I was truly, deeply happy. Life wasn't perfect. We still had challenges to face. But with Alex by my side, and our boys growing closer every day, I knew we could handle whatever came our way. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I couldn't help but smile. My story wasn't over, it was just beginning a new, beautiful chapter.